Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. Welcome, everybody. I am here with Nicholas Donlin from Zenith Design Build, located in Des Moines, Iowa. How are you, Nicholas?
Good. How are you, man?
Doing great, man. Excited to have you on. I, know you've been, with JobTread for a while now. You guys have had a lot of success. Heard you've won several awards. Tell us a little bit of, your story. How'd you get into construction? How'd you start Zenith? Kind of give us the origin story.
Okay. So kind of how I got into construction. I lived on a farm growing up, or part of my upbringing. And kind of just did stuff around there because you have to fix stuff and do things. And then when I was in high school, me and my brother, I have a identical twin brother, and we always kind of did some entrepreneurial things. And so my stepdad was big into hunting. So we, for some reason, we decided we wanted to build antler lamps when we were like a kid. And then we sold them and stuff, and didn't really make any money, but I thought it was interesting. And so we did that with a buddy. And then after that, kind of, we played sports and whatnot, and so it's harder to get do normal jobs as much. And so we'd buy cars and sell them, and what we call flipping cars, and stuff like that. And so we go to auction sites and just do stuff like that. And then when we were, and I don't know when it was when I was growing up, but we used to watch some flipping shows and stuff like that. So I always thought that was kind of neat. And it would seem like a next level to cars,
Yeah.
And so then, and at the time, you did all the work because you didn't have any money. So you just figured it out as you went. And YouTube was our best friend. We'd YouTube everything. How do you fix this on a car? And so you had to really problem solve and think things through. And I wouldn't say we were very super mechanically inclined, but we could figure stuff out. And so then when I was senior high school, we flipped a house. And that was during the recession. So we didn't know any better because we were kids at the time pretty much. And so anyways, that was a big learning experience, and then kind of went into college and didn't have a household. So you're broke going into college, because you put all your money in this house. And but it was a great experience. I learned a lot. And then in college, I flipped some houses and went to Iowa State for construction engineering. And then I did. I think at that point in time, I wanted to explore, right? Because you're trying to figure out what you want to do for your career. So I went through engineering. I learned a lot. Good logical problem solving skills, and creative problem solving skills through logic, I think taught me a lot there. And then, but during the summers, I do internships. So I did an internships actually in Dallas one summer with the Beck Group down there. And then I did work for a subcontracting company, a glass and glazing company. And then I worked for Procore, actually, sort of a competitor, not really of yours, but worked for them before. And they raised $70 million when I was there. So it's pretty cool to see their story and how they just blew up overnight.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to, I worked for a tech startup in the construction industry, and that was just really interesting. Went through an accelerator program, and it was just really met a lot of really cool people. We were in St. Louis at the time, and 3 of the top 5 GCs in the nation were out of St. Louis. And so we got to meet with their COOs or CTOs, all these people that were big wigs there. And it was a really cool experience. But then after that, I kind of saw that fail, and just really good experiences. And but I wanted to just understand construction more, and kind of get back into kind of the roots of things, and just see it so that I could kind of build from the ground up. And so I worked actually for a small GC in my hometown, which I did not want to go back to my hometown, but I got a really good opportunity, and I got to basically run their biggest jobs they've ever done, and implement technology. So I implemented some technology there with their staff, and it was just a good experience to really, really learn. And also too, I think I learned a lot of really good communication skills, because it's old school, especially down in Southeast Iowa where I was working. It was phone calls, it's meeting people face to face, it's having hard conversations. You got every day there's something different, and you're leading guys that are 65 years old, and you're 20-some years old. So it's whoa, this is cool, but also challenge at the same time. And you had to earn our respect and stuff like that. And so it was a good experience. Anyways, fast forward, I knew I wanted to do my own thing. That was kind of always my vision of I'm running my own company and kind of growing something from the ground up. So I moved to Des Moines because there's more opportunity, and I wanted to still be close-ish to family so I could, see family and whatnot. And because previously I'd live far away and I'd always travel home to like go to weddings and do those sort of things. So I want to be able to travel away and live somewhere close. And then so I kind of naturally got into doing house flips again because I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I was doing some tech consulting, and then I was naturally just got into doing cooler flips. And at the time I was dating a designer, and so we're just doing some really cool things. And then I kind of got noticed and kind of did some more social media stuff because I at the time didn't have any customers, and then it kind of just naturally stemmed from there. And I think from my time in commercial, I just learned a lot of stuff. Like I learned how to do better scheduling, like things that residential is not known for. It's not known for Gantt charts and scheduling. It's not known for documentation. It's not known for just better planning, I think, oftentimes. And so I got to take a lot of that stuff. And I work with architects. So we had all these like hierarchies and whatnot in commercial. And I just liked the idea of having more control. So I really liked the idea of the design build aspect or the model, because I had some architects that I worked with that were just really painful to work with. And so I think really kind of coming into that and getting the creative side with kind of the tactical side of how do you execute a construction project. I just love that coordination and how does it work? Like, I don't know if you can see kind of on my little whiteboard wall, like we draw stuff out all the time, right? And we're trying to figure out how does it work? How does the screen system work with the garage door? And like, I just love that, like how the creative side plays into or like kind of logic execution. And so I think that's naturally kind of how I found myself into doing this. It's been quite the journey ever since. So,
man, that's a pretty cool story, man. I mean, it sounds like you've been a natural born entrepreneur, wanting to do your own thing from the beginning. Building things. Getting that engineering background. Flipping homes. Super interesting. I didn't know that you had worked at Procore and some other tech startups, and that makes total sense now that you've got both the construction. You understand the technology side of it, putting it all together. Man, that's a pretty awesome backstory there. So when did you what year was it when you started Zenith Design Build?
2018 is when we started. January 12th, 2018.
Okay.
So about 6 years in now. Just learned so much. I mean, it's crazy what you can learn in 5 years if you really push it.
So you had both some commercial experience, residential experience. Maybe elaborate a little bit more about like some of those differences and where do you really find yourself gravitating towards? Like, do you still do any of the commercial work? Do you really prefer the residential? Kind of help some people understand, because I see a lot of people, kind of doing dabbling in a little bit of both, but not necessarily knowing kind of which direction they want to go. And so, obviously if you try to do, too many things and have too broad of a focus, it can be very hard for you to really build a very, succinct and scalable business. So kind of, what are your thoughts on all that?
For sure. I think it's a wise idea to when you're younger, especially when you have a lot of energy and kind of figured out your direction. I think it's great to try things. And I think I love the idea of that I have all these different viewpoints from things like commercial, technology, but all in the same kind of field. So there's some singular focus, I think. But so I enjoyed that. And I think that it kind of sets you up for success to have perspective on things, which I think is helpful. But then I think at some point you have to really say, what am I going to devote my life to or my career to? And so I do think that it's really important to have a singular focus. And so once I really started focusing on residential remodeling, we started just really, really doing it really, really well. And I think too, like from an entrepreneur's perspective, sometimes you think you can just execute all these things and do all these things. And oftentimes entrepreneurs are very high executors, or at least very good at ideas nonetheless. And I feel like oftentimes I feel like I'm good at that, but then you have a team of people, and then also you start to scatter this responsibilities, right? And if you change everything up on people all the time, they're not set up for success.
No.
If you have everything in your head and you're executing every single thing, it's easier, right? Like oftentimes it's harder and easier at the same time. And so when we started to scale and started to have more people, that was the challenge, is that you weren't doing everything, and then you didn't have like maybe the right process or communication plan or handoff meetings or those sort of things to set up for success. So I do think it's really important to have a singular focus. I prefer residential construction at the moment, partly because the paperwork in commercial I can't stand. I'm a doer, and I think that in residential you're there to do, right? You're not there to paper push. You're not there to you're there to build stuff, and you make money off of building stuff, not pushing papers. and kind of CYA type stuff, cover your ass type stuff. It's a matter about getting done. And I like that part about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we are kind of opening up the door maybe a little bit in the future. At least we're talking about it, potentially doing some very small TI type stuff for commercial, just because we see the market tightening a little bit, and we have some relationships. But we're going to keep the same process, the same flow of everything, how we work the design process, and then have some kind of more strategic partners to help us make sure that we're meeting commercial code. But I do love the idea of like bringing some stuff in it from commercial, because there's a lot of good planning resources that commercial uses. And so like we track schedule deviation, we track, baseline on schedules. We do a lot of stuff that aren't as common in residential, because to me, you measure things, and you measure things on a cadence, on a rhythm, on a weekly basis is how we do it. And then you can really start to show progress. And that's one of some of our big things this year, is to start to show more measurable impacts driven by data each week, to start showing progress and start showing where we should be spending our time. And I think that's more geared towards commercial oftentimes.
Yeah, that's really great insight. And I mean, when the construction company that I took over and ran when I built the first version of JobTread, so they were primarily focused on commercial. They did some residential. I think built one home, but like, at the end of the day, like we found that like, we were much better at the commercial side, because that's what, kind of the owners had been doing forever. When they got into trying to build that home and do those few remodel projects, like they did not do it very well, because that wasn't what they were used to. It was a whole different ball game, where you've got that homeowner as the customer who's in the property while you're trying to do the work, or, is very closely kind of watching over it, versus, we did a lot of repeat work for the commercial side where, again, they just trust you. They know you. They're not, kind of micromanaging, but we knew that we had to get things done on time and on budget. Otherwise they wouldn't keep using us. And so it did feel like a very different sort of kind of customer experience, if you will, working with the two.
Yeah, and your process should be built off of customer experience, or at least a portion of it, right? There's internal stuff that you have to just do because you have to do that. But when your customer is built for the customer experience, or when your process is built for the customer experience, then your residential process is different than your commercial process most of the time, Yeah. And I do think that it's really important to have a singular focus. And what I realized too is like when you have a really good team and you're in a rhythm, you're getting your bread and butter taken care of, then like, sure, you can explore other things. But if you're not clicking on all cylinders, then there's no point in exploring other things, because you're not going to do it very well, because you're going to start it and think that it's easy oftentimes as an entrepreneur, because I've been saying that some of my staff says is like, how hard can it be? And it's like, because I think how hard can it be, but it's like, but we have to have a team that executes it, it's easy to start things. Sometimes it's just harder to actually execute it fully. And sometimes I think the people that I've ideas, and myself included, think it's way easier to execute. And I think when you have a well-oiled machine and you have a team on board that can explore other opportunities, I think that's a good time to do it. But if you're not well-oiled, there's no point in exploring some of those things.
Yeah. So, given your background on kind of technology, I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about, how have, implementing, systems and processes and, the importance of that. Because I know a lot of times, entrepreneurs, they may be coming right off the tools, trying to start up a business that, they don't often know about how technology can really help them build a very strong foundation to scale their business. So, what insight do you have there?
Yeah, I think I always look at like, what's the core? What are you trying to solve? And I just think technology helps with a lot of like mundane tasks oftentimes, and it also helps from my perspective. Like oftentimes it comes from like a lot of data, right? And you can synthesize data through reporting, through those types of things. You can also keep very objective information through data in there, and measure per employee and sift information, filter information. So I think that's where, again, one thing we use JobTread for is to filter information. How is this superintendent doing based off of this? How's the designer doing? What's profitability per job, per super? Like you can sort of spell off a lot of different things. So I usually try to use technology for that type of stuff. And certainly you can use some automations with like CRMs and marketing type stuff, which is helpful. But at the end of the day, I think that a lot of technology is best at data because it's hard for us to wrap our head around that type of stuff. And that's a lot of how businesses are ran. But thinking of things sometimes, it'll March, so it's like Monday.com type of stuff, similar to that, if people are familiar with that. And I kind of like at my last company, I I built a little bit of stuff. Like I built submittal exchange and submittal processing and RFI processing through Smartsheet because it was way cheaper than a Procore or a submittal exchange. That's kind of an old software now, but I was focused on it. I had one person, me, focused on it, and I can implement it with my team. But when you get into doing like when you're leading a team, you don't necessarily want to be the point person on like building software. It's kind of a not effective use of time. So as we started progressing, I started having stuff in Smartsheet, and but then it just didn't get maintained, and it was harder to do things. So then we started progressing more towards like solutions like JobTread, like yourself, some solutions that are a little more out of the box that like were easier to accomplish with our team. And then nowadays you can integrate things with like Zapier and other things that I think can be helpful if you do it right. But I do think having like specialized solutions like JobTread is actually really, really important. In the beginning, I didn't think as much towards that because I thought I could do it myself, type of thing. But as software gets better and better, and especially in the construction industry, I always kind of felt like the construction industry was like the ugly child or whatever, that never got any attention because the software was always sucked compared to other softwares. And that's why I kind of always gravitated towards other softwares that were meant for the masses because they just have more money and whatnot to pump into it. But now you start to see like JobTread, like yourself, like we're getting good software in this industry. And for a long time, we didn't have good software in the industry. Like, I mean, I kind of started to like pushing software, and that's why I worked for Procore because I worked for a GC company that had terrible software. And I'm like, I need to see some cool stuff and see the inner workings of how this works because it's way more fun than what I thought at the time was construction. And so it's pretty cool to see how the software has come. And it's also kind of cool to be a part of it and to, talk to your team and see a company come from the kind of ground up and try to be a part of that. I think that's cool. I always thought I wanted to build my own, but I think at this point in time, I think that my skill sets are not as much geared towards that, but it is really cool to see what you guys have done, and also just to see the software in the industry just kind of taking a next step, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's when I took over that GC, I mean, I saw the processes, the paper-based, spreadsheet-based processes, and I mean that was the biggest bottleneck. That was why they were struggling to scale. And so when I first went in, it's like, look, we just need to go find you some software. And that's when I looked at everything out there. But yeah, I was also very surprised that, such a huge industry like construction was really lagging in technology and software options. And like, everything just like very antiquated. I mean, it's not like there weren't things there because there were, but it was like, you could tell that they had been started, 10, 15 years ago, just kind of leveraging, old technology, didn't have that good, easy to use feel, easy to learn. It wasn't fast. And so that's when, we decided to embark on building JobTread. But yeah, totally with you on the need for it. But it has been nice to see, the industry is really starting to adopt, the software and really understanding the benefits of technology and how they can help you streamline your business and help you get organized and, build a, more successful business overall.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nuts to think about. That's such a big industry that has been such poorly utilized with software. I think is fascinating to me. And even just like, I mean, I think of like one thing that was important to us recently is when you guys rolled out that WIP report, and it's like, man, like everybody's using QuickBooks Online, but has no ability to do this. And most people don't even know what a WIP. I mean, most smaller construction companies, especially when they start, they don't even know what a WIP report is. They get a deposit, and they think they make money. And I mean, that's the way we were when we kind of started. And so little things like that make a huge difference. I mean, there's some bigger softwares out there that are kind of like softwares like Sage or whatnot that'll do that for you. But it's so old and antiquated that there's so many things that it doesn't do well at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see the softwares come along in the construction industry, from my perspective. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we take a step back to, again, the foundings of Zenith, kind of what did your team look like then? Like, how did you first get it off the ground? What were you doing, in that first year? And then kind of what's the team grown to, and how have you expanded out, kind of the team over there?
Yeah. So I started out by myself, and then kind of naturally just kind of grew. I was always kind of interested in, I loved the construction side of it, but then I started to grow more of an interest towards the sales. And I've always been a growth minded person. So I really wanted to grow something and do something. And I didn't want a little construction company. I wanted to try to get a big one. not just for ego purposes, but just so I can grow and learn and understand. Because the bigger you get, the more people you have to lead and manage, and the more you grow as a person, I think. And so, anyways, I had a business coach. I got a business coach fairly early because I realized that like I needed somebody to kind of hold me accountable, but also to kind of like teach me and kind of mentor me. And that was a good experience. And then from there, I kind of learned sales tactics through that person. I never sold before, never knew what that really meant. And I was very much a people person, but I was more of a project manager type person and, get her done type of guy. And so, and I had good ideas, I felt like at the same time, but I learned sales, and all of a sudden, like in a year, we sold 5.5 million and we were $1 million company. And I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? And so kind of trial by fire. And I think that's oftentimes as entrepreneurs are, it's like our business owners, it's like you get after it, and then you got to figure out how you're going to solve the problems from the wake that you create sometimes, and which it makes you grow. It also makes it painful at the same time sometimes. But so we sold a lot, and then I was like, all right, let's hire, baby, and silly old me thought it was easier than what it was. And, but again, it grew so much through that. Like we hired like 15 people in like 6 months, moved to an office space, bought a building, moved there. I mean, it was just too much. Like, and I was just thinking, you just hire people and they just go do it,
Yeah.
And, there's so many more things that go into it, and, hindsight 2020. So yeah, grew really, really fast. We made the 85,000 list a couple of times, 85,000 list, 8,500 list. So we were like 493, I think, on the list. And so, just grew really, really fast. And that's 5,000 measures like revenue growth. So it was just revenue. It didn't mean we were super profitable, but we grew fast. And, but from that, learned a ton, and just, learned from my mistakes. And, in the beginning, some of the biggest struggles was just finding the right people. Because you grew fast and you're trying to find people, make the rules, like I oftentimes refer to sports, right? Like in sports, there's rules of the game, and then there's rules of like the organization, right? Like you can't take steroids, you can't do these things. And in a business, you're creating these rules. Like in a sports, it's just known, right? Because everybody knows the rules. They grew up and they do it since they're 5 years old. But then people aren't doing construction businesses at 5, like they're not doing the design build process at 5 years old. So you have to kind of create these rules, and so you're creating the rules of the game. You're creating how it all works, but then you're hiring people, and then you're trying to make these people a team, right, at the same time. So I think there's just so much to learn through that, and if you try to do it too quickly, you kind of almost have to remodel your remodel business, because you build it, and then you build the house, and you build the house wrong, and then you got to go remodel it, and that's kind of how it happened with us a little bit. And but you learn a lot from it, right? Like if you didn't do it, you're not going to learn from it. So and then, so now to fast forward, we're at, we're about 6-7, we'll be doing 7.5 million revenue this year. And then, 18 employees. I don't know what else for stats, I guess, on that. We push a lot of 5-star reviews. That's some of our goals this year too, to make good customer experiences. But, our main kind of focus right now of this year's team. We call it one team, and that's kind of our big, singular focus for the year. Because I find that, like you look at these sports teams, and it's not always the best players that win. It's best team that wins. And we're trying to make sure we're just becoming a better team, because that hasn't been as much of an emphasis in the past as it should be. And once you get a good team rolling in the right direction, man, I mean, it's hard to stop them, so.
I want to come back to the team here in a second, but like, so, what's your average job size look like? I mean, kind of some sort of a ballpark. Because I mean, to be able to very early on, hit that, 5+ million in sales. And I mean, again, this is very few, years in. I mean, you said 2018, right? Is when you started?
Yeah, it was a couple years in, I think 2-3 years in when we sold 5. And that was, yeah. So what was your question?
So like what did those projects look like? What was the average, size of your jobs, and how long did it take you to deliver those? Kind of a little bit more about exactly what you were selling to be able to get to that point.
Yeah. So at that point in time, we were probably selling average job size of 100K. I would say approximately. Last year, we closed the year at average of 226K. So we definitely increased our project size because, coming from a commercial background, I always say the more elaborate it is in residential, the better we are at it, because it takes a team to coordinate, a team to design it. And that design build model really works with more complicated projects. And so 226 we were at last year, we kind of naturally grew a little bit each year in terms of project size. I can't remember how many we closed out last year. Let's say like 30 projects. We were about 6 million last year. And so that's we for a bit of time we tried some new construction, and that, again, not a singular focus, and we didn't do well at it. So now we just do remodels, and we try to crush the remodels and make good money doing remodels.
So where are you finding the leads? Like, where are the customers coming from? Are they, are you doing, marketing, advertising? Is it referrals? Like, where are they coming from?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, right? Like when you go to a new market, you don't know anybody, you kind of figure out alternative, because I would always ask, like, how do you find leads? How do you find the business? And everybody would be like, referrals. And I'm like, well, thanks for nothing, because I don't have any customers. So how do I get referrals? Yeah, appreciate the help, but I'm teasing a little bit. But so I started doing more with social media. We started doing some video content. We tried to do some unique projects, and we won some awards, and that really helped kind of pushing our presence online. And in the past couple of years, we really started to focus more on SEO. So we get a lot of stuff from organic traffic, people searching remodels. I think that's a really, really great kind of top of funnel thing, where it's like, or top or bottom funnel, where people really come in. So I would say, our biggest thing is SEO. We do social media. I think it's a good interview platform for our clients. But we do a lot of that. And then besides that, we get referrals. Those are probably the two biggest revenue drivers for us. And then I'd say people should not forget the old school stuff too, like some mailers. So, I mean, you don't have to spend a bunch of money, but you like most of the time, or at least in our market's not huge. There's like little pockets of areas with good project, good homes. And so stuff like that, putting your signs in the yard, having your vans drive around, your trucks drive around, like that stuff helps. I mean, it's not like it's quote unquote as scalable as like just doing some SEO type stuff. But I do think all that stuff helps. In my opinion, and some of that stuff's easy to do, it's super easy.
Yeah.
It's not super technical, like you don't have to like understand how to like, work Google,
Yeah. So once you sold these jobs, and it sounds like you kind of just created a big wave of work to come in, and then you needed to go focus on, kind of building out the rest of the team to actually deliver it. So what is, what little bit more detail about what's your team look like today? So how many people are focused on sales versus project management, execution, what else, back office, kind of how do you have it structured with those 18 people?
Yeah. So on like kind of, we kind of refer to the front end of the process. We have our sales team, our designers, and then we also have our estimator kind of paired in with that. Estimator's obviously operations guy too, because he has to make sure we fulfill the estimates. But so we have 3 designers. We have 2 salespeople. We have when you go from there to the operations side, we have 3 superintendents, so about matches our design team. And then we have a COO and a field manager that really kind of help make sure that it gets executed well. And then we have some field guys, about four field guys that really kind of operate on the smaller scopes of work type items, the more complicated to coordinate, the miscellaneous things to make sure our jobs run nice and smooth. And then the rest of stuff we sub out. So we sub out most of it. I think the most scalable models is where you have less field staff. But I do think that there's a lot of importance to having field staff, and I think it's a competitive advantage as well. So we want to have some, but we don't want to perform everything, because then you're a design company, a construction company, and then a subcontracting company, and it's already hard enough to be a design company, a construction company, or a GC company.
Oh.
So I think, again, when you think about like our industry, a lot of times people are trying to be the design company, the construction company, the sub company, and it's hard to make all that scheduling work. I mean, it's challenging. You see how hard it is just to run a project by itself of scheduling subcontractors, but then you also have your labor force stuff on there. It can be a scheduling challenge.
Yeah. So you found a lot of value, obviously, in bringing the designers in house. I see a lot of people early on, they're subbing out the design work too. So how has that transformed your ability to sell these projects?
Yeah, I think in the beginning we did the same thing. I subbed out all the design. It was a good experience. If you operate it really, really well, if you have a partner, whether they're outside or inside, they're kind of a team member at that point. If you do a lot of business with them, so I really like having in-house because we could have more control, and we could have we could have just more consistency, right? Like our plan sets are like we do colored plan sets because we can actually, it's like you're a kid again and you get to see a drawing in front of you, you know? And so we get to use color versus notes everywhere. So like things like that's one example, but you also really connect this design to price. And I think that one of our big things or one of our uniques is unique selling props is that you get this connection so that way you get a great experience and you understand and you're being taught through this process. You're not just like, I want a kitchen and it's like, here's 100K. It's like, okay, well, here's a kitchen and here's a kitchen for, you know, 50K or 80K or whatever it is. But then here's a $200,000 kitchen. Where do you want to go? You tell me, what do you like the best? And then we find that it gives us a lot of opportunity to upsell, but then the upsell isn't just to like upsell. It actually gives our clients a much better project and actually a much better customer satisfaction. And everybody wins, right? They spend more money. They get a better project in the end. We get better photos. I mean, it's all of the above. And I find that when you do it that way, it works. It works really, really well for us. And then you have a good relationship with your estimator and your design team. And that's super, super helpful. It at least has been helpful in our process. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So at what point did you start, you know, building out kind of what, you know, or what does your back office, you know, from an accounting standpoint, you know, managing all of your accounts receivable, accounts payable, kind of all of the financial aspects? I mean, early on, I assume it was just you kind of having to do all that. But like, at what point, you know, have you built out more of a team there, and you know, kind of when did that start happening, or do you outsource to a bookkeeper, accountant? I mean, how do you manage all the financials?
Yeah, so our kind of structure, the way we work it, we have an internal admin assistant. She's printing checks each week. She's balancing the books at the end of the month. She's working with our book or our accountant that's separate, you know, just to get month-end closeouts working well. And then we also have actually a VA in the Philippines that helps with just inputting all of our job costs into JobTread. And we have a really neat process to make sure that we know stuff's over budget in our system, and our superintendents do as they approve it to push into our QuickBooks. But then when it goes into QuickBooks, I know when we meet each week to do our ARAP meeting where we approve payments to subcontractors and whatnot, vendors, we can see every single one that's over budget and how much it's over budget by. So it's a really, really awesome system, in my opinion, with checks and balances. I think every system should have checks and balances, especially as it relates to the financials. We also have systems for, we call it second set of eyes, again, checks and balances, as drawings go through and they get signed. But yeah, so admin assistant, we have a person in the Philippines that really puts everything into JobTread and works that system really, really well. And then we have kind of a utility player that works on operations that manages that person in the Philippines. And she kind of helps with just making kind of a little bit of a glue there that helps really make sure that person in the Philippines is managed really well. And so that's what our back office looks like. We first started out with one person that did bookkeeping in the office. And there's pros and cons to have multiple people do that, because there is nice to have checks and balances because you have multiple people in it. You know, not that people would steal from you, but you know, if that happens, you have checks and balances, which is helpful. But it seems to work really, really well for us. And you just got to have really clear lines of responsibility. And since they're in separate softwares, and you know, I think that helps with having separate people in those two, if you have enough volume for it. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you have a very clear, you know, well-oiled machine. I'd say, you know, going to, you know, $7.5 million in sales this year. You know, fairly young company still. You know, that's exactly what it takes. So is to have the right team with the right systems, the right processes. Sounds like you've done a phenomenal job, you know, building all that out. You know, one question I have for you is, you know, how do you differentiate yourself with your competitors and in the market? Yeah. Like, you know, what kind of, you know, points do you use when you're having to compete on a job?
I think one of our biggest ones is that we're educating our clients through this. So it's not just like a lot of people want to basically be like, well, what's my kitchen cost? Or and the kitchens and bathrooms, that's much easier, you know, to some extent. But like when you get into complicated projects, we want to make sure our clients feel educated through the process. And so, you know, our big thing is just like guiding the client through that. And I don't think a lot of people do that very well. And it seems like a simple thing, but I do think that it's really important for, if you're a design build company, to really guide your clients through that and give them the power of choice. Like I'm a big believer that, you know, nowadays people's buying decisions are Amazon, boom, right? I got it. like I can compare everything. I know my pricing. I know what it looks like. I can just make decisions quickly. When you go buy a car, right? I can go to this dealership, this dealership, this dealership. I can look at the, entry model, and I can look at the expensive model. But in our industry, it's hard to compare apples to apples, right? You can't really say, I want to call these 3 people and then like give me a quote, because one person might have different standards, right? Like you just don't know. It's not mass manufacturing. And so I think a really big thing for us is to make sure we're educating our clients. And so they actually in our process almost inherently get like choices to pick, but not too many choices to pick, because they give the power of too many choices is I'm confused. So I think that's a really, really big thing in our process that we really, really pitch. I think that's probably the biggest thing. We also are data driven too. So like we'll tell clients, our cost overrun or our change orders for unforeseen conditions is X, right? Somebody can tell you 50,000, but if it ends up being 70 and we're 70 to start with, would you rather work with us? It's up to you, right? We know what it is and we can share that with you. We know what our schedule deviation is, so we can tell clients through that process too. This is what we are. And a lot of companies aren't very data driven, and they can't give those numbers confidently, at least. So that's another, I think, a little advantage or competitive advantage for us. But I would say those are 2. We have 3 uniques on we use traction methodology. So we have a VTO and we have our 3 uniques, and one's the kind of the guidance of guiding the client through educating, and then data driven. And I'm not, there's a little more articulate than I'm saying it now, but it's data driven. And then it's our integrated proven process. We have a very proven process for how you work the design process to get the client with the best product possible, and for the best, what we believe is the best value.
Yeah.
So
definitely sounds like a winning, compelling proposition there. I'm curious.
Overload bias.
At winning this process, like, did you realize, like, that you guys are like successful? Like, what does success mean to you? And, at what point, like, did you kind of feel like you officially made it? You got your company off on the, off the starting block. It's up and running. What does success look like to you?
Yeah, I would honestly say I don't know if I would say I'm quite there yet, because, you're kind of always stretching a little bit, but I think that like this year will be really telling to show that we can make predictable results. We made some mistakes in the beginning that, you suffer through, right? Like you have, like, for example, some of the mistakes we made is when I was in commercial, we did some unit pricing type stuff. And so I was big into unit pricing and, working your spreadsheets and making sure that and ultimately that's provided a ton of good information for us to give budgetary numbers for clients up front as they compare options in the design process. But in the beginning, COVID hit and things changed so much. We didn't have bids from everybody, and things like that really hurt us. And so it took us, a couple of years to work through all of that. And so last year was kind of a mixed bag. We had an amazing fourth quarter last year, but the first part of the year wasn't great. And so now it's like when we can really show results and data for that, I feel like I'll be able to answer your question differently. But I would say after this year, we'll really be able to tell more of our success based off numbers, right? The numbers don't lie. Like I can pitch somebody on anything. I can pitch somebody on numbers and why, but you need the numbers as proof. And so it'll be, I think we've always tried to do the right thing to get there, and try to make the best decisions we can at the moment in time. We can make decisions, but I would say that we're not there yet. We're on our way. So I would say.
Well, I love your ambition, and you really do have that big vision, picture. A lot of people, and I mean, I can tell you, after working with thousands of builders and contractors, like getting to that first million. I mean, that's the holy grail early on, and then much less getting to 5 and now beyond that. Like, I mean, but it seems like you're very much you just keep kind of focusing on how do we keep growing, how do we keep building. Again, never like kind of just accepting status quo and sitting back on your heels. I think a lot of times it can be, easy to just sort of sit back and say, okay, this thing's going. We don't need to keep focusing on how can we keep improving. But it sounds like you really are very focused on how do we keep building the team? How do we keep, improving these processes, making sure that, we're not dropping balls, we're providing a great customer experience. So I'm curious, where do you want to see this thing going in, next 5-10 years?
Yeah, we have our 3 and 10-year picture on a V2 and I think at the end of the day, like, I mean, as a synopsis, really, I think what it comes down to is team, your people and your processes and whatnot, and to get the results. But like, I mean, we definitely want to grow. Our plan is to, like, our 10-year pictures to be the best in the Midwest, and we have kind of our criteria of what does that mean, how many reviews, what gross profit, what revenue marks. How are our people looked at in the industry? Like, so for example, we want, a part of our goal is in the next 10 years is to, from each department, we have an industry representative, right? Like, 40 under 40, or they represent us in, conferences or whatnot. So, that's kind of our big picture where we want to go. And as far as like my big picture, like big picture, I look at it kind of like if you're raising a kid, right? Like, you kind of go through these stages, right, of learning and growth, but at some point they're on their own, right? And I think that's one of the ultimate versions of success in business. And like, because if you have to be there doing it all the time, like, what did you actually build? And so to me, I think that long term, it's building something that can be standing without you. Whether you want to be a part of it or not, it's up to you. But I think that if it can run without you, or without the owner, I think that's a good sign that you have people and processes and systems that work. So
yeah, well, I love it, man. That's a great aspiration. I think, I wholeheartedly agree that, you know that you've built a really great thing and a great business, a great team when, the business owner, the leaders can take that time, go on vacation, spend more time with the family, like, and the business keeps growing and it keeps running and operating without you having to be there firefighting, putting out every single, issue that comes up, because inevitably that will happen. But when you've built the right team and you've got the right people trained, they can now start to do that. And you got to empower them, right? You got to be able to delegate and trust that they can handle those situations. And it sounds like that's what you're doing over there.
Yeah, we're trying. I think what I've realized too is, like, some of the biggest challenges, again, this is from my small perspective, but when you go from like this owner operator and you're doing everything and, but then it's almost like, and I got this visual from, I can't remember where it was from, but basically they showed like a pyramid, and the pyramid's like, you're basically fulfilling your client's needs. You're doing basic sales, like you fulfill the needs of operations, like basic stuff, relatively speaking. But then when you want to go and actually like grow your business or scale your business, it's like a whole different triangle or a whole different pyramid, or whatever you want to call it, to scale, because it's more about leadership. It's more about management, having having predictable success. And I think we're at that point where we're still we're not made the transition, but we're making that transition to like having like a good, well-run team that's like managed well, that has leaders, that has we still want to execute on everything, right? Like just like we would in a smaller business. But you can't scale unless you have like a good team of managers and leaders. And I think that that's one of the things that we're trying to build out right now. And so that way, like, in this little pyramid, like the owner is like, you're not trapped, but like sometimes you feel a little trapped, right? Like you basically just created a job for yourself, right? You're not owning a business that's like an investment. It's literally you created a job for yourself, and that makes it hard oftentimes to go on vacation or do things or get away or not be stressed out. And I think once you make that second leap, or at least that's my hope, is to not necessarily feel like you created a job for yourself. You actually have a little bit of freedom. Obviously, you still have a lot of responsibility. It doesn't just go away, but you want to distribute the responsibility, because it can be obviously very challenging if you're responsible for every single thing, right? Or you have a team that's not taking ownership in things. And I think a team of owners is really the ultimate goal. Is when you have a team of owners, or at least there's a sense of ownership, then I feel like it's got to make a world of difference. So.
Can you touch on what you guys do from like a cultural standpoint, from, really building that, what you said earlier, the one team, like how do you keep your team on the same page? What do you do to help, train your team, help, them, become the best that they can be? Like what does that look like from a cultural standpoint for you?
Yeah, I think it's first you have to lead by example, right? Like if you don't take ownership and you blame things on other people, right, then that's not going to show a good team mentality. And you have to be kind of a good coach to your team. So I think it first starts with that, because, it kind of comes down to the rest of the team. But then I secondly think that it's constantly reiteration when you get the wrong actions or the wrong results, right? And it's trying to nip that stuff in the butt quickly as possible. or at least coach on it, right? Like, when you bring up problems in this meeting, right? Like it maybe brings the whole meeting down. Can you bring up the problem and try to come up with solutions? So you kind of, like it's having conversations like that I think is super helpful. And it also creates ownership, right? Because if they're bringing problems and solutions, they're owning the solution. And so it's things like that are super helpful, I think, in my opinion. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. I think the other thing too is like what we're trying to do too is to create it a little bit more like a sports team. So like you have a scoreboard and you try to win the game, right? It's simple, right? It's relatively simple. You have the rules you have to follow, but it's relatively simple. And so there's a really great book called The Great Game of Business, and we're trying to kind of implement some aspects of that to get like common goals, right? What's the one common goal? Like we have some individual performance metrics, obviously, for our team. Like it's like their individual stats, right? Like when you go to I just think that sports is such a good analogy when you think about like you have one person with their individual stats and they have their individual stats. They know if they're doing good or not. But oftentimes in business, nobody knows, right? They don't even have their individual stats. And then not like that, they don't even know the scoreboard. What's the scoreboard even, right? So it's like, think about how you're supposed to guide a team and create owners when nobody even knows, And so I just think sports is a really, really good analogy. So we're trying to create that common scoreboard with that common GP net, so that way we can spread the money out accordingly afterwards. So I think it's things like that also help. You want this kind of common unifying goal that I think because your team can drive towards that. So
yeah. And so are there like kind of incentives that you've put into place for people that incentivize kind of focusing on that that growth and kind of how do you use goals and incentives?
Yeah, we haven't honestly done as good of a job as in the past as we should have. So now this is kind of the year where we're really trying to push towards that. So I actually was just kind of working on this. We have a meeting today to talk about like the kind of the charts we're going to measure month on month. So we have a team meeting each month and we're going to go through these charts. And so we're going to go through that as like a common goal. And also we're going to make it a little competitive, right? Like here's construction deviation, here's scheduled or design deviation, both in, GP and also in schedule deviation. So it's like, they kind of compete a little bit because there's a natural tension there, which is kind of helpful. But then we also have some individual metrics for like our producers, right? So design needs to produce design in an efficient manner and under budget. Construction needs to do the same. So we have some individual bonuses for that too. It's not honestly as incentivizing as we were hoping for. So we're working on redoing that. But our thing right now is we want to basically kind of have that behind the scenes. So we can understand that for the first year before we implement something that's not going to be effective. So we're going to measure behind the scenes to see what the bonus could be and then see what it is going to be, type of thing. Yeah. So we can actually put a plan together that's going to actually be incentivizing.
Yeah. Well, the thing I keep hearing, I mean, you're very much, data driven, coming up with what are those, those KPIs, those key performance indicators, the metrics that, you're realizing are really driving the business and are, kind of, they drive the results that you need to accomplish. And so it seems like you're doing a very good job of, focusing on that, identifying those things, focusing on it, tracking it, and that's ultimately what, I think every business owner needs to do is figure out what are those, those key things that are going to make you successful and they're going to help you achieve your goals. And if you can't define that, if you don't have those goals and those metrics and like, again, you're just kind of, sitting there, just treading along, but like, you got to really understand where do you want to go and set goals to focus on that. And that sounds like exactly what, what you guys are doing. I love the sports team analogy. And, again, it's, one thing they kind of, can't call on the tech side is, gamification, but it's all about coming up with those ways to, incentivize people either individually or as a team to put points up on the board. Like, everybody can win together and it's exciting when, you score a goal and you put a point up and like, keeping that, mentality where it becomes sort of a cultural thing where we're excited, to compete and to win. That's everything that we do here internally at, JobTread. I encourage everyone to really think about how do you make it a positive, reinforcing type, deal instead of you keep screwing up and just focusing on all the mistakes. It's like, you got to focus on the wins. Obviously you need to deal with the mistakes and use those as coaching moments, but celebrating those wins is a huge way to just build that camaraderie.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that there's usually a big miss on a lot of companies that way. And if you don't have a clear vision for what you want, and part of a clear vision, like numbers are pretty clear, they're not much more clear than numbers. So one is a one. You know?
Yeah.
And also I relate it to, I think, numbers and time, right? Like it's the time is it's like January 1st, 2024 is, there's no other time in time than that, you know?
Yeah.
So and that's like project management 101, right? Knowing numbers, knowing time frames. And I think when you think about that and you have a really, really clear vision, then just like in sports, like clear vision, simple, right? Win the Super Bowl, right? And then you know the rules on how to get there, you know,
Yes.
you know, like, and you know what to do. I think one thing that I'll just add to is that oftentimes people will forget. They'll measure those things, but then they won't measure the activities it takes to get there. And I would say, like, that's one thing that Traction talks about, like on a weekly cadence of like measuring the activities, because the activities are what, like, X amount of phone calls for your salesperson, X amount of consults, right? It's an activity. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting the results, but if you make sure you at least do the activities, you're bound to at least get some sort of results. But if you're not doing the activities, you're not going to get the results. Like, you don't even have the numbers to get there. So I think that's pairing those things up really, really makes it kind of magical, in my opinion.
So, man, well, you've shared so much insight here, and just kind of wrapping up, I'm curious, you know, if you had, you know, one or two, you know, pieces of advice that you would give to other entrepreneurs who are earlier on in their journey, you know, striving to reach the point that, you know, that you've been able to get with Zenith, like, you know, what is it? What do you wish you would have known, you know, back when you're starting that you know now? What advice would you give others?
My biggest advice would be, get a coach or a mentor. I would almost more than that, I would almost recommend peer group, in the industry that you're in. But like anything, like, I think that oftentimes as an entrepreneur, it can be kind of lonely at the top, right? But it also can be, there's no accountability sometimes, right? And I think that you need somebody that's going to tell you you're doing it wrong. Like, what are you doing? Look at your numbers, right? And I think that's super, super helpful, because sometimes you get in this mode of like, everybody else is doing it wrong, or I could do it, or, you know, but I think it's helpful to have somebody holding you responsible. And also, like, most of the stuff we're doing, we're not reinventing the wheel. Like, this is residential remodeling. It's not rocket science. This isn't like creating a new field. Like, people have been doing this forever. Yeah, you might be doing it different and better and whatever may be. And there's obviously, like, I think that we can do it better. And I think, you know, I have all these aspirations, but a lot of things already been done. So ask the people that have done it, and then do it your own way. So that would be my biggest advice. I think, you know, for people, I think that if once I started having coaching and also had the peer group, that made a huge difference. And I wouldn't probably be here with my company if I didn't have that. So that'd be my first thing I'd recommend.
Awesome. Yeah, that is great advice. And I tell people all the time, I mean, again, we have a very unique kind of perspective here where I'm seeing thousands of businesses, and like, I can definitely tell a point where they join those peer groups, they find a coach, like, it's just a clear, you know, the trajectory just starts to really pull up, you know, and shoots up when, like, you can work with others, because again, like, you don't know what you don't know, you know, and so being able to have, you know, that group of people, you know, that network or that coach, that mentor, like, whatever it may be, you know, having that insight can just, like, literally save you, you know, months or years of having to learn things the hard way, when you can just learn from their experience. And, you know, so many people, you know, just want to give back and want to help others be more successful. I mean, it's, you know, probably the reason you're on this podcast here is to be able to share with others so that they can learn, you know, and I can't, you know, reiterate enough that is so helpful and so important for people to really focus on, you know, growing their business and doing it, you know, in ways that hopefully they don't have to have the same stumbling blocks and learn the hard way, all the mistakes that everybody else has done, because, you know, again, that knowledge is out there, but it's up to you to go and, you know, go find it and then implement it.
I agree.
So, hey, look, Nicholas, I really appreciate you taking the time, you know, to come on, you know, to share your experience, share your story. I mean, this has been invaluable. You know, I'm very confident this is going to, you know, really help, you know, so many people out there to learn, you know, from you and how you've been able to build such a successful business. You know, I can't wait to see where you take the company over the next, you know, 3, 5, 10 years. You know, it's super exciting though to see your success and to see how well, you know, you have been able to build this company. And yeah, I'm just very very appreciative, you know, to have you part of the JobTread family as well, and, you know, just to be here, kind of to witness your success, because it really is it's inspiring to our team, it's inspiring to the community. So keep up the great work, man. Really appreciate it. And, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it, Eric. Yeah, thank you so much. It's I think you guys have a good platform and a good software, and I think it's really cool that I've always look at people's intentions or think about people's intention, that it just seems like you guys have a great team with good intentions, and it seems like a good culture. So it's cool to see that, and love talking with your team members. Big shout out to Travis. Travis Lee's a stud on your team. So, but yeah, if anybody's looking to do softwares in this industry, I think that yours is a great one. And it's also good to be part of, to be an extension of your guys' team and our team, and having good relationships. It obviously helps a lot. So I appreciate all that.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Eric. See you, man.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.